What is slip?
The most simple definition is clay and water mixed together into a material that is thin enough to be applied with a brush.
And what is slip used for?
Slip can be used for many different applications, from joining things together. Slip can have colorants or different materials added to them for visual effects and can be used as a decorative application.
How do I fix cracks in pottery before firing?
When something is still soft clay or leather hard, you can fix cracks by scoring and sort of like moving the material across the crack. You can even backfill with additional material, but the drier the clay becomes, the more challenging it becomes to fix that crack. If clay is hard leather hard to bone dry, I would probably encourage you to maybe recycle that clay and to learn from that flaw and figure out how you could make it better. You should always evaluate the time spent repairing something versus learning from your mistake, going back and doing it the right way.
How do you recycle clay?
What I do in my studio is I actually lay my clay out and dry it out completely. When you dry clay out completely and you add water to it, it does something called slaking. Slaking is when each particle saturates and pushes the particle around it away. And so it evenly moistens the clay. So I saturate my clay, I slake it down, I dry it back out till it's like a soft material, and then I wedge it into usable clay.
What happens when a pot gets stuck to the kiln shelf?
So when a pot sticks to the kiln shelf, it often means either glaze has run down the surface of the pot coming in between the foot and the kiln shelf, or maybe the pot wasn't wiped adequately going into the kiln and actually had glaze on the surface that comes in contact with the kiln shelf. When the run or the glaze adherence is more, oftentimes you're actually having to break the pot off of the kiln shelf, and then someone is going through a lot of manual labor to grind that away and re-wash the shelf.
What are the biggest mistakes people make with clay?
Using too much water. Water is your best friend, but it's also your worst enemy. The more water we impart into clay, the more the clay shrinks. The more the clay shrinks, the more likely it is to crack. The more moisture you impart, the bigger the crack becomes. So I oftentimes see people making their initial pot and then it's cracking on the surface. Instead of compressing those cracks away, they're adding water and kind of like smoothing slip over the surface, which will help in the short term. It will look beautiful and smooth. And as soon as that material dries, it's gonna crack and come back with a vengeance.
What's the difference between glaze and underglaze?
So if we think about clay, underglaze, and glaze on a spectrum, underglaze falls in between clay and glaze. Underglaze has more flux in it. Flux is a material that lowers the melting point of other materials than clay does, but it has less flux than glaze does. Glaze melts almost completely in the firing, where an underglaze would melt but not completely. And the clay will also have some flux, but it is much less than an underglaze or a glaze.
What's the best way to store my clay?
Is in a sealed container. That sealed container could be a bin, or more likely you're gonna store it in like a heavyweight plastic bag. I often talk to students about tying that bag off, like making it into 2 bunny ears and physically tying it in a knot, or using some type of rubber band or hair tie or clip to hold that closed.
What's the best way to clean my pottery tools?
We want to make sure that we don't send a lot of clay down whatever sink or water source that we're using. So I encourage people to use sort of a wash bucket to kind of wipe their tools down preliminarily. And then you would pour that bucket off potentially through a sponge, filtering the material that's in the bucket. And so we would just dump that excess water and excess material into a reclaim that then would get turned back into usable clay.
What's the best way to store my pottery tools?
So a lot of pottery tools are made from wood, and when wood stays wet, in an enclosed area, it tends to grow mold. So we want to make sure that when we're storing our pottery tools, we actually allow them to dry out completely before putting them into anything that would be a sealed container. If you're going to and from a studio, I think a pencil case or some kind of little box is fine. And then I would just leave that box open either in your car or when you get home so that your tools can completely dry out in between using them.